What's your response to the raids on 26 properties in Cape Town over alleged 1.6 billion tender fraud involving Cape Town officials and contractors?
Well, I've asked about that, and it was in fact the city manager himself that suspected there might have been problems in some tenders, and they called the police. It wasn't some whistleblower that came up and said, oh, but you know, there's something fishy going on there. It was the system in the city working to flag things that didn't look kosher. And the minute those things were flagged and didn't look right, the city manager contacted the police. That's quite different from having a whole lot of undercover networks that have to be uncovered by whistleblowers who then get executed and killed.
It probably took everyone by surprise that you were elected within a DA as the candidate for mayor in Johannesburg. Did it take everyone by surprise?
Well, it took me by surprise, that's for sure. I mean, it took me by surprise. I decided that I'd put my hat in the ring. I realized it was a critically difficult job to do. I may fail, but I've never gone into jobs because I thought I would succeed. I've been into jobs because I thought they had to be done. Another major contributor to generational poverty and decline is the horrific extent of substance abuse in South Africa. Alcohol, tik, heroin, myope. I was just in Johannesburg recently and visited Vredendorp, otherwise known as Vitas, which is a very famous precinct. And I was totally appalled by the number of people who were clearly substance addicted, who were living on pavements and parks and in bridges and all over. And we have to find an intervention in the scale of substance abuse that has some chance of curbing it and making it manageable. Otherwise, it will destroy entire sections of the city. There are many factors that contribute to extreme poverty in South Africa. One is teenage pregnancies. The scale of that problem is breathtaking to behold. That's a structural contributor to poverty. The scale of men who abandon their responsibilities to look after their children is another breathtaking thing, which contributes to generational poverty. The failure of local government to provide water, sewage, electricity, roads, clean environments contributes massively. The government has to change its economic policy, no question. It has to stop things like making race more important than competence in appointments, for example. It has to stop fig leaf legislation like BBBEE, which is just legalized corruption to make a few people in the ANC rich. It has to stop all of these things. On the other hand, every person in society has a responsibility to give more than they take, if they can, and to make sure that when they have children, they are going to really commit their lives to looking after those children and to giving them a future, even if they are poor.
This is actually interesting. 11 mayors in Joburg since 2016. How would you provide some stability there, do you think?
I hadn't even counted that.
That's like Weimar Republic, Weimar Germany.
Look, it's ridiculous, but it is the consequence of voter choice. And people always say to me, no, you can't say that to the voters. And of course I can say that to the voters, because if they spread their vote amongst all little tiny parties that each then have the balance of power and that are needed to bring us over 50%, then we're going to have extremely unstable coalitions. You can't get anything done in a tiny little term where everyone is threatening to move to the other side if you don't do what they want. They want to be able to say, we put you in, now we want this position and that position. And they often don't want a position as a politician. They want a position in the administration because that is where they can control the tenders and the contracts. That's what they want.
How do you convince township residents to vote for the DA there in Johannesburg? I mean, a majority of them are probably now voting for parties like ANC and Action SA. How would you switch them to your side?
Well, the big question is, do people want service delivery? And I think that wherever voters live in Johannesburg, they want water to come out of their taps. They want their lights to go on when they switch them on. They want their refuse removed, etc., etc. And our offer is better basic service delivery. That is what this election is about. It doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mouse. And that is the issue. Who's going to catch the mouse of service delivery in this election? I think people are fed up enough with the complete decay and progressive collapse of Johannesburg to vote to turn that around. And that is our offer. Frankly, I have no idea what the ANC wants to do, except one thing. They want to stay in power to have access to capital flows, because the ANC has really just degenerated into interlocking networks of various criminal syndicates. So that's what the ANC is offering to the voters if you strip away everything else. If you take away their rhetoric, of which they've hardly got any credibility left, that is what they want. They want to stay in power to have their hands in the cookie jar.
Do you think Ramaphosa still listens to his own speeches? Because I don't think the other people do. Do you think he listens to his own speeches?
Well, when he said the DA was better at service delivery, that was an impromptu comment. It was an off-the-cuff comment. He wasn't reading a speech. And I think he meant that, and I think he knew what he was saying.
If you became mayor, what is the very first piece of infrastructure you would tackle, and how would you fund it?
The first infrastructure I would tackle would be water infrastructure. I was up in Johannesburg this past week, and we went to see a number of factories that had not had water for 9 weeks. And when you don't have water in a factory, people can't come to work. And when people can't come to work, you don't have production. And the overhead costs for the factory are extraordinary. And it's been amazing that they've carried those costs for 9 weeks, but soon around 4,000 people are going to lose their jobs. And this is the consequence of failing water infrastructure. People lose their jobs, are unemployed, and then are homeless, and we get that terrible vicious cycle. And eventually I've had to track down an expert in the city of Cape Town who tragically used to be in the city of Johannesburg, and he's going to help me try and diagnose what the problem is.
I think in one of your interviews you said there's like almost 8 factions, like Fikile Mbalula and Paul Mashatile, and then
Oh yeah, well, the big contestants for the leadership of the ANC are, of course, Paul Mashatile, which would be a complete travesty. I'm just reading Peter du Toit's book called The Dark Prince, and that makes very worrying reading. And one wonders how a person like Paul Mashatile can get to the doorstep of the presidency and perhaps walk through the door. That is really worrying.